Hey audit fans, and welcome to our series on auditing standards. Today I'm going to look at ASA 300, which is about planning, and this is the first in the 300 series. Remember, everything in that 300 number, 315, 320, 330, etc., are all about things we need to do involved in planning the audit. Now remember that our audit, our outcome is our audit opinion. And our opinion can only be made if we've got evidence. How do we get that evidence? Well, we need to start with a plan on how to collect the evidence to support our audit opinion. So today is going to be the start of our series into planning. And planning is a few different things. So this standard is really more of an overview standard than anything else. Sort of like 200 in the way that we set the scene. Nothing too interesting about our table of contents. Just a reminder that our requirements are the bits that are legally enforceable. And if you ever get stuck trying to interpret the requirements, well, just use the explanatory material. They're often linked together. Of course, ISA 300 and ASA 300 are in conformity and alignment, so there's not really anything extra to worry about here. Within our ASAs, of course, whenever you see these AUS paragraphs, those are ones that just apply to Australia. They're not part of the international standard. So let's delve into the first part, which says the scope. And remember, the scope is really about what's this standard all about? So it's our responsibility to plan an audit for the report. We don't just go blazing in without thinking about what is our plan. And we have to have a plan because the audit is full of risk. And so to try and minimize the risk of giving the wrong opinion, we need to have a plan in place. This also comes from some legal cases and legal precedents which say we need to have a plan. So we could have a plan for a new audit or for a recurring or existing audit. So what do we need to do? Well, paragraph 2 says, what's the point of having a plan? Well, a plan is an overall audit strategy. Now later on, we're going to look at something called the audit risk model that helps us with our audit strategy. Why do we have a plan? Well, the auditing standard tells us a few different reasons. We want to find which are the important areas of the audit and devote appropriate attention to those. Remember, I mentioned the idea of risk. Where there is greater risk, we want to spend more attention. We also want to identify and resolve any problems earlier in the audit than later. And if we try and think about a plan, we can try and preempt some things that might come up. And remember that an audit is an activity where the partners are trying to make a profit. So that means that we need to do the audit in a way that's effective and efficient. So effective means giving us the correct opinion, we don't give the wrong one, and efficient means in a way that is profitable. Other reasons why we engage in planning is to help us find the right team members. All right? Audit firms usually have a range of different staff at different levels. So you'll often have juniors or graduates. Then they'll be supervised by senior auditors. After that, you'll have managers. There'll be often senior managers. You'll then have directors before you get to the top of the food chain, which are the partners. So we need to figure out what is the best mix of these different staff members with different levels of experience and competencies to be able to do the assignment. We also have to make sure that we have a plan so that we can have supervision and direction. And remember, that comes into ASA 220 about quality control. And if at any point we decide to use experts or other group auditors under the 600 type of area, then we are going to need to coordinate them. So it's best to have a plan so that all the moving pieces of the audit happen smoothly. Now let's scroll down to our requirements, and here they are right here. Paragraph 5 starts by saying the partner and key members shall be involved in the planning. So this means everyone in the team, or most people in the team, are involved in the planning so that they can be aware of the risks, strategies, and things that might need to be considered when figuring out what auditing needs to be done, what procedures, what evidence needs to be collected to support their opinion. So this is a team activity, and that means that as an auditor, you're going to need to have good skills in communication and in teamwork. Now, at the beginning of the audit, there's a few things that we should do. So at the beginning of the audit, we make sure that we've figured out anything surrounding ASA 220, we've checked off our ethics, and we've signed our engagement letter under ASA 210. Remember, that is our business contract that we sign with our client. So these are all things before we get to the client. Then we need to think about the actual planning. So I have to have my overall audit strategy. We know that there are a couple of different types of strategies. There's a substantive approach to doing an audit. We also have a controls-based approach. And then we have a mixture where you do some controls testing and some substantive testing. Now, the audit risk model will help us figure out which approach. But the standard says, in figuring out what strategy, I need to figure out, well, what's the scope of the engagement? What are the reporting objectives of the engagement? Am I doing this for an Australian firm, an international firm? And I need to consider things that might affect my audit team in doing the audit. I also need to consider if there are any preliminary engagement activities. So did I do anything before the audit that might affect extra information I've gathered, or if I did a review at the half year, how that might affect the audit, so that then I can determine the nature, timing, and extent of the resources I'm going to need, and those resources are typically audit staff, to perform the engagement. So what goes into my plan? It says there, develop a plan. So it'll tell me about nature and timing and extent of risk assessment procedures, methods that they're going to use to gather evidence, any other audit procedures that we might need to do, and, this is really important, all of this goes towards collecting evidence. Now remember, as we collect evidence, we may need to revise our audit strategy. All right, so this is what paragraph, I think it's 10 here, says. So the auditor shall change and update their audit strategy as necessary. So if we find something in our risk assessment procedures, that might mean that we need to revise our plan. Our plan is never fixed. All right, it always needs to be flexible in case we discover new evidence. Now, I also need to make sure that I document my audit, and we've already looked at documentation in a previous standard. So we would be looking at ISA 230, which says document everything, but we have to document our strategy and our plan. And then our last set of paragraphs in 13 says, well, if this is a new audit, so an initial engagement is essentially a new audit for a new client, then there are some specifics that we need to consider. If you want to read more about the planning process, then you can jump into, as always, the explanatory material. That'll help you interpret the requirements a little bit more closely. They give you step-by-step instructions on an audit. Now, these aren't legally enforceable, but they're highly recommended for auditors to read. That's all for our video on audit planning. I hope you found it useful. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you thought the video was useful, give us a thumbs up. And if you have any questions about audit planning, please leave them in the comments and I'll answer them as soon as I can. Thanks for watching everybody, and I'll see you next time.